Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I will be covering both the ice dance and pairs events at the 2024 Grand Prix Final in Grenoble, France. Let's start with the ice dance competition, which had a little bit of chaos yet again. Not the kind of chaos that I want to see, though. I want to see everybody skate their best at the competition and see who comes out on top. I don't like seeing when teams make big, massive mistakes. It's unfortunate. So the showdown between Madison and Evan and Piper and Paul, if there is going to be one this year, we'll have to wait to at least four continents a couple of months from now, if not Worlds 3 months from now in Boston. The winners here, not surprisingly so, were Madison Chalk and Evan Bates of the U.S. They won with a sizable margin of victory here. They were not challenged in either segment of the competition. Obviously, largely that was due to the big mistake from Piper and Paul, which I will get to. But at least for them, they look really strong. Their levels were fantastic. Sometimes we'll see with even the top ice dance teams, they'll be on top, but they don't have the best levels, kind of propped up by GOE and PCS. That was not the case for Maddie and Evan. In both segments of the competition, they had the best levels of the event. I feel like ever since they won that world title in 2023, there has just been a tremendous amount of confidence from this team that we're really beginning to see. I feel like these two programs this season also highlight Evan really well, and they just look unbeatable to me right now. Anything can happen, right? I think Piper and Paul looked unbeatable at this point 2 years ago. Life happened, and then Worlds came and they lost some momentum and they ended up with the bronze. So obviously anything can happen. But at this point in the season right now, it's very hard for me to see if Maddie and Evan skate like this, anybody beating them for Worlds in what would be a third title in a row, which, as I mentioned in either the Skate America or NHK episode, we have not seen that since Grishik and Platov in the late 90s. They look, like I said, really good. I think that these programs really are strong for them. I especially think the free dance is the strongest material that they've had in this Olympic quad. The rhythm dance is better, obviously, with the 8 choices of music versus the 11. It's not my favorite rhythm dance of this season, but there's not a lot of rhythm dances that I like this season anyway. And I think that they have really done a pretty decent job at sort of taking all of those pieces of music and making it work. And it almost feels like nobody else could really do what they're doing, which is exactly what you want. And at this point, everybody is going to be chasing them. And like I said, they look very, very difficult to beat. And going into a home Worlds, I think that's a really excellent place for them to be. Now, I certainly cannot say the same about the silver medalist here, Charlene Guinard and Marco Fabbri of Italy. They look like they are on fumes at this point in the season. Talk about a team going in the wrong direction. When they debuted this robot program at Lombardia, they got really great scores. Also with their rhythm dance, got really great scores. Looked like they were still top 3 dance teams in the world, headed to challenge for that podium, a little over a year from now at the Olympics. This season has just not gone their way. Now, they end up here with a silver medal, which is fantastic for them. Better than probably what they could have hoped, because you come into this thinking that it's going to be Madison, Evan, Piper, and Paul, and probably them for the bronze. That's what I had in my predictions. So they come out of here with a silver medal, which is great, but it feels very much like when Fear and Gibson won their 2 Grand Prix earlier in the season. Yes, you won, but your scores aren't great. Not really sure if you're getting the reception that you want from the judges, and you're basically profiting off of other people's mistakes. And I just don't feel like Charlene and Marco are going in the right direction. The rhythm dance here, I thought, was actually one of their stronger performances of the season, and they were barely ahead of Fear and Gibson in that segment of the competition. We get to the free dance. No mistakes here. Again, barely ahead of Lila and Lewis. We're talking less than 200ths of a point, and they only beat them by a point. These two are going to go head to head a month from now at Europeans. And if I am in the camp of Guinard and Fabbri with Barbara Fusapoli, I think I'm on high alarm. This is like a 10 alarm fire at this point. I would be shocked if they show up at Europeans with the same material. I think they're going to go back to last year's free dance. And it's not that I don't think that the concept is a bad concept. Like I said, I felt like at the beginning of the season, I really liked it. And the costume changes, a lot of people hated the costumes. The costumes are still very, very polarizing. Some people really like the new costumes. Some people really don't like the new costumes. Some people still hate the new costumes, but they feel like they were better than the old costumes. I understand people's frustration with the old costumes, but I just don't feel like these new costumes work for this program. And it was kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. Like, we're not going to change the program, but we're going to change the costumes. And it's just not working. And I think if they come back at Europeans with this same material, I think they're going to lose to Fear and Gibson at Europeans. I'm calling it right now. I think they're going to go back to their old free dance. I think the judges are probably going to tell them that. I think Barbara's probably going to come around and say this is going to be the best thing to do to salvage this season and then start over next year and try to build their way back. Because the last thing that they want to do when they've had a stranglehold on these top three places, I mean, they were silver medalist at Worlds in 2023, right? Is to go into an Olympic season fighting as an underdog to get on a podium spot in a home Olympics. So I'm worried for them. I haven't liked really, I have liked their programs the last 2 years, but it's always to me that they just don't leave the same impression as Maddie and Evan, Piper and Paul, even Fear and Gibson or LaJoie and Laga. I mean, of all of the teams in this Grand Prix final, I think they're the least memorable team. And that shouldn't be the case. They're better than that. I hope that in the offseason that they bring in somebody from the outside just to give them a little bit of something different, a little bit in the packaging, something somewhere. I wish they would have done it this season because it's probably more risky to do it going into the Olympic year. But they're in real trouble to me of getting past. And it's not just Fear and Gibson that would scare me if I'm them at this point. Honestly, it would also be Smart and Deke. Not in the rhythm dance so much because Smart and Deke have ways to go to be getting mid 80s in the rhythm dance like we're seeing Charlene and Marco get for years. But for them to get less than 123 points here in the free dance, the way that we have seen the Dune program really go for Olivia and Tim, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Olivia and Tim could score better than them in the free dance at Europeans if this scoring trend continues with them. And it's not just them. It's also Lila and Lewis. So let me flip over and talk about our third place finishers here. Lila Fear, and Lewis Gibson, which again, this is their first medal at a Grand Prix final. They've been here this entire Olympic quad, and they've been sort of permanently in that fourth or fifth spot. And they finally get on the podium here. And again, it feels extremely underwhelming. Part of it is, again, they're definitely profiting off of a big mistake from Piper and Paul, but also the scores are just not, they're just not impressive. I mean, frankly, I would have had Eugenia and Jeffrey over 120 points. I would have had Marjorie and Zach at probably 124, and these two teams are getting 122. It's just, I gotta be honest, I probably was as frustrated watching the ice dance event scoring as I have been kind of this entire season, because I just feel like they're purposely holding down certain teams. And stay with me here for a second. So we basically know post-Olympics, these top three teams, not here, but the top three teams that have been the top three for this Olympic quad, Chalk and Bates, Gillis and Poirier, Grenard and Fabry, those three teams are moving on, right? We totally expect for Fear and Gibson to continue on, right? And I think we also totally expect for LaJoie and Laga to probably be the team that's fighting with them at that point. So my question is, why are we waiting for 2 years before they're going to give the scores for Marjorie and Zach for basically the same skill level that they're probably going to have in 2 years? Why are we waiting 2 years to give them that when we could just give them those scores now? I don't get it. It happens every single cycle. It's nothing new. Whatever team continues to go on, there will magically be another team that all of a sudden is going to be getting the scores to compete with them. We saw it last Olympic cycle with Papadakis and Cizeron, right? Virtue and Moyer move on. Papadakis and Cizeron are left. Who's going to be the team that's going to push them? Is it going to be Hubble and Donahue? Nope, it was Sina and Katsalapov, right? Kind of a little bit out of the blue. They weren't that next best team, but they were the team that got the push with the judges and got the scores all of a sudden that were competing with Papadakis and Cizeron. The same thing's going to happen 2 years from now in that first Grand Prix season when it's Fair and Gibson as team numero uno, right? Whoever that next team is, which I think is likely going to be Lejeune and Lagat. Maybe it's Carrera and Ponomarenko. Maybe it's the Mrazczyks. Who knows, right? But you certainly expect for them to be in that conversation. Why are they magically going to get winning scores at that point, and they're not getting those very similar scores here? Like I've said before on the podcast, like when you have teams, especially at Grand Prix, and they're running second, third in that Grand Prix because they're the second or third best team there, they're going to get second or third place scores a lot of times. And then when you put them in Worlds, well, now they're the eighth best team, and so they're going to get eighth place scores, right? But this is the thing. Like if a team gets nines at such and such Grand Prix in their skating skills and they skate very similar at another Grand Prix and you give them eights, have their skating skills deteriorated? And coincidentally on the same thing, has another team have their skating skills magically improved because somebody else had a mistake? This is the issue that I have. I didn't mean to go on a rant this long, but this is the issue that I have. So I'm looking at Guinard and Fabry and Fair and Gibson. They're not super impressive in the scores. And I'm looking at Eugenia and Jeffrey, and I'm looking at Marjorie and Zach, and I'm like, they should be scoring closer to what they're getting based upon what we have seen them do, and they're not getting it. It's very frustrating to me. But congratulations to the top three here for getting on the podium. Let's move on to those that were off the podium. So in fourth place here by just a tad was Marjorie and Zach. And if they are going to compete with Fair and Gibson, they're going to have to improve their rhythm dance. Now, I saw a lot of people on Twitter when I was fussing about their scores. They got to work on their step sequences, blah, 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 blah. Fair, right? Again, if you go and look at the protocols, Marjorie and Zach had the second best levels of the rhythm dance behind Chalk and Bates. But they had the fifth best GOE. So is what they're doing of lower quality than what everybody else is doing? I don't think so, especially not with some elements. Like their twizzles are probably the best in this whole freaking competition. So why are their scores not reflected in that? I don't get it. I thought they were underscored in both segments of the competition. But if they are going to compete, they're going to have to get up over 80 in the rhythm dance, which I think, frankly, they should be getting. But here they got 77. And so even if they would have come out and gotten 124 points in the free dance, it wouldn't have moved them onto the podium. They were just way, way too far behind. They needed somebody ahead of them to make a big mistake. Thought that they did well here, especially in the free dance. I like the free dance more than I like the rhythm dance. I think the rhythm dance is fine. I think they skated fine. I think it just doesn't show them off as well as the free skate did. They certainly didn't harm themselves in any way here. They had a really great outing. I saw some people saying, oh, Canadian Nationals is going to be really interesting. No, it's not. I'm sorry, but they are still going to be behind Piper and Paul at Canadian Nationals, right? But Marjorie and Zach should absolutely be on the podium at Four Continents. They should, I hope, continue to make strides to sort of knock on that door. This is another issue that I have. I know, I'm sorry. This just became a whole rant of a podcast, but we have a bit of a hole with the top five, right? Because Lawrence Fournier-Beaudry and Nikolai Sorensen are no longer competing. Reasons well known at this point. They kind of occupied one of those spots in that top five. And then there was sort of a gap between the next teams. Now that they're gone, and Marjorie and Zach are definitively Team Canada number 2, why aren't they getting those scores? I feel like they're better. Zach is certainly better than Nikolai was. Marjorie, not as strong as Laurence Fournier-Beaudry, but as a pair, like as a team, I just feel like there's this place, there's just like this invisible place that the judges have left where Lolo and Nick were, and I feel like Marjorie and Zach should be getting higher scores than what they're getting. Long story short. All right, moving on. Fifth place competitors here, surprisingly so, was Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier of Canada. And tragedy struck them again, this time in the rhythm dance. They were, in Mark's words, pushing their pattern, very, very deep, wide. And basically, Paul ended up hitting the boards and falling down in their pattern step, which is one of the worst places to have a fall. The worst place to have a fall would be the midline step. That's the highest scoring element. But the next worst place to have a fall would be probably the pattern step. I think you could also make a really, probably choreographic rhythm sequence where Maddie and Evan fell at Skate America. Also not a good place to fall. There's never a good place to fall, but this is probably one of the worst places to fall just because it's a higher scoring element. You're going to lose half the value with the fall and a fall deduction. So they found themselves in sixth place after the rhythm dance. There was basically no way they were going to get on the podium, which they did not. They almost ended up in fourth. They did pull themselves up very well, which they got 127 points in their free dance, which goes to show you, hey, the judges, they can give out higher scores in the first group if they want to, right? They just oftentimes don't. But I do really love this Beach Boys rhythm dance that they had. One of my criticisms for Piper and Paul coming out of last year's Worlds was that they needed a stronger rhythm dance vehicle, because if they come in, try to beat Maddie and Evan by being 2 or 3 points behind, it's just not going to happen in the free dance. They're not going to have that kind of a gap that they can make up. They needed a stronger rhythm dance vehicle to be able to compete with Maddie and Evan, because they can compete with them oftentimes in the free dance. Both Piper and Paul and Maddie and Evan were always historically stronger free dance skaters than they were in the rhythm dance anyway. But Piper and Paul in this Olympic quad definitely have struggled a bit more in that department than Maddie and Evan have. And so they have this stronger vehicle this season. I was really interested to see how it would all shake out. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see it here. But of course, they were also wearing different costumes again. So I wonder how you guys are feeling about the changing costumes every single competition. I guess I tend to be a little bit on the superstitious side. Like, as long as something's working, it makes me nervous to change anything. So it's like, if this costume is working, like, I want to stay in this costume. I don't want to change it because it might mess something up in some way. I think it's fine. I just think it's highly, highly unnecessary. And I wonder if they're just going to kind of mark these costumes as like bad luck from here on out. I do really like their free dance. I appreciate that both them and Gwinnard and Fabry and Fearon Gibson and Chalk and Bates are all bringing new elements to the table with their free dances. They're not doing the same lifts and the same sliding movements. They're all bringing new things to the table each season, and this season is no different, and I really like that. And I like that with Piper and Paul as well. I think they've really improved some elements in their free dance that have not been super strong for them. Like lifts the last 2 seasons have been really good. But unfortunately, we didn't get our showdown. The question is, are we going to get it at 4 continents this year? Because we haven't yet in this Olympic quad. 2 years ago, with the health scare that Piper had, they withdrew from 4 continents, and it was just Maddie and Evan there. And then last year, Maddie and Evan had that sickness at nationals and had to withdraw from 4 continents, and it was just Piper and Paul there. So is this the season that we're going to get both teams at 4 continents again? And might that be the competition that we can see both of these teams go head to head at their best? Because I think that's what we all want to see at this point. In the grand scheme of things, does it hurt them to have a rough skate here? Potentially. We know that ice dance is so much about momentum. So we'll see going forward if it does or if it doesn't. But I don't think it helps them, that's for sure. But how can they bounce back? And then in 6th place here, as we sort of expected, was Yevgenia Lopareva and Jeffrey Rousseau of France on their home ice. Again, thought they were underscored in the free dance, especially had 2 very strong skates here. Mark was very complimentary of things like their knee bend and edges, which again begs the question, why are their scores low? Now, granted, they had the worst levels of the competition. And you would expect that. I mean, they're definitely the team slotted 6 here, and probably even somewhat surprising for them to have made it here at all. But this free dance is so strong for them. They look very well poised to be third place at Europeans this year, which has kind of been a bit of a revolving door. Last year it was the Lithuanians, Reed and Ambrulevičius, and 2 years before that it was the Finnish team of Turkula and Vers-Lewis. This year, might it be Evgeny and Jeffrey? Might Smart and Deke sneak in there? Who knows? I think it's definitely up for grabs, but with a berth here into Grand Prix Final, I think it bodes very well for them if they keep skating like this. And I just really love this style for them. And I will compliment especially like that lift that they do beginning like right on the music where she's just straight up in the air in like a statue. Like she doesn't move a fiber, and it's just amazing. Love, love, love this program. All right, let's move on to the pairs. And the winners here were Minerva Fabian Hossi and Nikita Volodin of Germany. And I think it's not surprising to see them win here. This is their second Grand Prix final win in a row. They've been very successful in the Grand Prix. The question for them going forward is, do they have a better Europeans than what they have last year? Are they the favorites going into Worlds? I think you could certainly make a good argument. They're very consistent and have been this season. And we've seen some teams, namely Mira and Kihara, who are here, and potentially also with Deanna and Max, who maybe have higher scoring potential than this team does, but they haven't been as consistent as we have seen Minerva and Nikita. They absolutely blasted past their personal best mark in their short program here. Really, I complimented Minerva on just serving tons and tons of face in this performance. I thought Nikita was also trying to bring out a lot more performance in that short program as well, trying to make up for that fluke fall that they had in their step sequence just a couple of weeks ago. Really strong in the short program. And outside of Minerva putting her hand down on side-by-side triple toe, I think it was, or maybe it was a Salchow, the first jump in their 3-jump combination, they were really solid in their free skate as well. I'm warming up a little bit more to the choice of music. I mentioned before in their first Grand Prix that I really love the cut that they used in Nebelhorn the best, but I'm warming up to the rest of it a little bit more, but I still just absolutely love the last minute of the program. It's just so fantastic. And they look really good. They will certainly have a little bit of a reprieve, if you can say that, at Europeans, because I think the next two best teams won't be there, and that's Mira and Kihara and Deanna and Max. But obviously, they've still got the Georgians to contend with, the Hungarians and the Italians as well. But they look poised to win their first European title, although they looked poised to win their first European title last year as well. So we'll see how they do in their next competition. And second place here was Mira and Kihara, who were my pick to win here. And they looked really good in the short program. Riku ended up with an undercall on her triple toe, which is why they ended up just a hair behind Minerva and Nikita going into the free skates, but they were basically tied. It was whoever else skated the best in the free skate was going to win. And unfortunately, Riku just had a really rough skate with her jumps, and it sounds like it started in practice sessions as well. So they came out with their triple toe, double axle combos. She doubled the triple toe and then singled the first double axle. She did get the second double axle off, but it ended up with the undercall. So that was very costly. She fell on their throw triple loop, which is usually, I feel, it's funny because their throws are good elements for them, but it just seems like there's an oops in there somewhere. It happened at Worlds last year, and at different times, it's sort of, I don't know if the timing is just a little off or if I feel like for Riku, it's a nervous thing because I've definitely heard that she doesn't under-rotate jumps in practice, but it's definitely an issue when it's in competition. So not only that, but their throw triple Lutz that they do later in the program also wasn't landed very well. She put both hands down. And so both of their throws had issues in one of the side-by-side jumps. Their side-by-side Salchows were beautiful. And both of their programs are good. I think of all the pairs this season, them and Cam and O'Shea, to me, have the best combination of programs, and definitely of the top three that they do. Love the Paint It Black short program. And you can really see their speed. Sometimes speed doesn't translate well on TV. Had the privilege of getting to see them at Skate America, and yes, they are definitely faster than all of the other teams. You can see where even with the undercall in the short program and still getting very close to Minerva and Nikita, probably what is like their absolute best. You can see that they have the highest scoring potential in pairs. And with all of those mistakes that they made in the free skate, they still got 130. If they're on, they will win, but they've got to be on. In third place here was the Georgian pair of Meltikina and Buralava. Think that they're really starting to build some momentum, and they're starting to get better scores, which a lot of times you see judges will reward consistency, and they got their personal best in their short program. Their throw triple lutz that they do is looking so much better than what it did at Skate America. It was shaky there. It was shaky in a lot of the practices, but it's really been rock solid for them ever since. I really like the contrast of programs that they have. I mean, the Bronski beat that they do in the short program, it's really fun. And then in the free skate, it's very dramatic. I think that the music is sort of haunting, sort of. It really works with those final lifts that they do in the program. They were not perfect here in the free skate either. She had an issue on their jump combination, which was supposed to be a triple Salchow, double axle combo, and she stepped out of that first double axle, so they didn't get the third jump in the combo off. They also had a couple of lifts that only got a level 3, which in pairs can be a really big deal because they have so much similar tech content that getting a level 3 on this spin or this step sequence or this lift can be the difference between a whole place. They almost got second here, and if they would have gotten a level 4 on one of those lifts, it might have been enough. Definitely would have been enough if they would have gotten a level 4 on both of those lifts. But they also look like a team that we kind of expected to medal at Europeans last year. A lot of nerves got in the way. They just didn't have it. They seem to have that confidence again going into Europeans this year, and I definitely expect them to be on the podium there, and wasn't surprised to see them on the podium here. Moving on to fourth place was Sarah Conti and Nicola Muschi of Italy. Their only error really was in the short program on their throw triple loop. She stepped out of it, and that caused them to be fourth after the short program instead of in a podium position. And that definitely cost them. After the fact, Nicolo said that it was his fault. He messed up the timing on that somehow. Still, they got over 70 points for their short program, and they were definitely within striking distance, only a couple points coming into the free skate. And a minor issue and a major issue, the twist, the very first element of their program, he bent his knee when he caught her, and that caused just a little bit of negative GOE for them, and then he fell on their side-by-side triple Salchow, and that kept them in fourth place. They were unable to move up and get ahead of the Georgians and get on the podium. This Papa Can You Hear Me free skate has grown on me a little bit. I'm still not in love with it, but it definitely has been better in this outing and at Cup of China than it was when I saw it earlier in the season, when it just bored me to tears. It's a lot better now. They seem to be getting along much better this season. Like last season, it just seemed like a struggle. I mean, not just on the ice, but like even in the kiss and cry, you could just sort of feel the tension between them. Things seem a lot better this year, and it's definitely showing up for them on the ice. They are definitively Italian team number 1. They certainly look to get back on the podium at Europeans. I think that they're definitely on the outside, but with a huge shot to also get on the podium at Worlds as well. They'll have to be clean, most likely, and they certainly are capable of doing that. In fifth place was Ellie Cam and Danny O'Shea of the U.S. And if you just look at the way that they are being scored, the judges really like them. They are really rewarding them for a lot of the transitions and the very complex routines that they have. I can see a pecking order right now with the way that the pairs are being scored. If everybody were to skate their best, Mira and Kihara win. The next two teams are probably a bit of a toss-up between Stellato, Deschamps, and Hassi and Volodin. in one hand, I want to say Deanna and Max because they're reigning world champions, but the way that Hasi and Volodin have been skating this year, and if they go in and win Europeans coming into Worlds, they would also have a lot of momentum. I think those two teams are so similar, it would just come down to who gets the best levels. Like, for instance, here, Minerva and Nikita got a base level in their death spiral in the free skate. It didn't hurt them here because they had a huge lead with all the other teams that made a mistake. That could be the difference between them winning and being in third place at Worlds, being off the podium. Who knows? That's kind of, I feel like those next two teams are kind of like, it's a toss-up. But those are the top three teams. The fourth team, if everybody skated to their absolute best, would be Danny and Ellie. They have the scores to beat Conti and Mashi, the Georgians, the Hungarians, which would be that next bunch. We've seen it here. I mean, they once again did not have great throw in the short program. Everything else was fantastic. Step out on the throw, which is so frustrating to watch, right? Still got a 69 points, almost 70 with that mistake. They can easily go 73, maybe even 74, and with the home crowd, with a clean skate. I think they probably have the best short program in pairs this season. And their free skate, it's very difficult to tell because there's always been mistakes somewhere, but I don't think it's crazy to say that they couldn't go close to 140 if they skated clean. Which means that they could put themselves in a position to medal at Worlds if they were to skate clean. There's a lot of ifs in there. We haven't seen it, right? But in the free skate, we actually saw them land 2 clean throws. The loop got negative GOE, but it was vastly better than the loop that we saw in the short program. And what let them down here were their side-by-side jumps, which are normally really good for them. Danny fell on the side-by-side triple toe, which I can't remember the last time I saw Danny fall on a side-by-side triple toe. And then on the side-by-side triple salchows, she had a little issue coming out of the first double axel, somehow managed to still get the second double axel off. So they ended up with some negative GOE on that jumping pass as well. So it was the side-by-side jumps that let them down, whereas it's usually the throws. So they've got all the elements, right? It's just about putting them all together at once. Like, to me, they're almost in that same boat. Like I often will put Zingas and Kolesnik, of just being like almost there, just like almost there. And I can see it happening. And I can also see it being exactly kind of like what we've seen kind of all season, just like this almost there. But from what I can see with the judges, if they go clean, they're going to be in that conversation. And who would have seen that a year ago? Like, I couldn't see it. I know there's somebody who was like, oh yes, I could see it. Fantastic. Go buy a lottery ticket. I've really grown to really love the Stand By Me program. I still really question the layout of it though, because they put all of those really, really hard elements just back to back to back to back. And I wish they would just space one of those throws just a little bit further. I guess they do it to get them out of the way and give them plenty of time to really sell the lifts and sell the program. And you can see where if they could go clean, both of their programs could really be showstoppers. I also question, like, especially after the short program, I was like, do we have to do the difficult entry into the throw? Like, I said the same thing last season. Like, can we just like land the throw clean, and then when we get the throw clean consistently, then throw in a difficult entry? But then they land it in the free skate, so then it's like, well, I don't know. I really want to see this program. I really want to see them skate to their best. They're really, really, really good. Really good. All right, last place here was Rebecca Gilardi and Filippo Ambrosini of Italy, which were, of course, a last-minute replacement for Deanna and Max, who had to withdraw. Of course, right after I recorded last week's Grand Prix episode, probably less than 24 hours later, it was announced that Max had an illness and they were unable to be able to compete. And so Rebecca and Filippo, who were in the middle of breaking in new boots for thinking they were not going to get the call, end up getting here. In the short program, they skated really well. Didn't score great, though. And it's unfortunate for them because I think they're getting penalized for the side-by-side double axles. The judges aren't giving them a whole lot of GOE on that. I feel like they're also withholding skating skills, which I don't think is fair because they do have really good elements. They have good transitions. They have very difficult entries into lifts and into their throw. I still would like to see their step sequence have more speed, but ultimately it's a really good program. And I feel kind of bad for them that I feel like the judges are kind of holding them down a little bit because technically with the side-by-side jumps, they're not there and they really don't have another strategy. I mean, if they go back to last year's strategy of just a hope and a prayer with a triple Salchows, like that's not a good strategy. It doesn't work. The double axles are much better. They're a much more consistent jump for them, but it's clear that the judges are not really a fan of that and seem to be withholding some marks because of that, in my opinion. In the free skate, the whole beginning was just really rough. And unfortunately, it just sort of put a damper on the whole performance because they had an issue with the twists just right off the bat. And then they go into both of their side-by-side jumping passes, which were just like a total disaster. They were not in sync at all on their axle combos. She did a single axle, double axle, just an axle combo. They were very off sync. And then they go into what's supposed to be side-by-side triple Salchows. They both doubled them, and the jumps went off at different times. It was just a really rough start. Everything else after that was really good, but I felt like the performance already was just kind of a little bit of a downer because of that start. And I just don't think it could ever really kind of recover from it, unfortunately. I still think that they're the better choice to go to Worlds because I feel like while their ceiling is not as high as Bakari and Garizi, who have two side-by-side triple jumps, I feel like Bakari and Garizi have a much lower ceiling than what Rebecca and Filippo have. I feel like Rebecca and Filippo, you know what you're going to get with them. They're probably not going to get on the podium at Worlds, but they're probably also not going to bomb. And with Bakari and Garizi, yes, the ceiling is higher, but we don't see the ceiling very often. We haven't seen them at all this year. And I feel like they have the much more potential to bomb a little bit more. And then we're back to only having two Italian teams again. Now, if Conti and Mashi continue to skate as well as they have, they really shouldn't be any worse than fifth at Worlds, which looks like that second Italian team needs to be eighth, which it could be very tough. I mean, we have 5 very strong teams that are here. We have strong teams who are not here in the Hungarians. You could throw Hawk and Kunkel in there. You could throw Anastasia and Hector from Australia in there. And top 8 gets dicey. I mean, you could probably also throw Leah and Trent in there on a good day. I still would feel more comfortable with Gilardi and Ambrosini, but I definitely can see the concern that Team Italy would have because of their side-by-side jumps. I don't know where Bakari and Garizi are in terms of their recovery. If we're going to see them at Europeans, I think they're going to have to be at Europeans if they want a prayer to get a world spot. I still think that Rebecca and Felipe have showed enough at this point to get it, even with the mistakes that they had here. But we'll see. All right, so that completes both the pairs and the ice dance. So Pamchenko awards for ice dance. It's really hard to give it to anybody except Maddie and Evan. It was really kind of a mistake-filled event. Even, Lila had a couple of twizzle issues in both of her programs, even though I thought Gwinnard and Fabry were good in their rhythm dance. The free dance still, it's with the new costumes, it's just not working for me the same as it did earlier in the season. And I thought Marjorie and Zach were good, but definitely going to give it to Maddie and Evan, really for both programs, just showing up and showing out. And then in the pairs, I'm going to give it to Ellie Cam for landing both her side-by-side jumps and getting off that double axle when that first one went awry. She got off that second one, and they finally landed that throw triple Lutz in competition. She stayed on her feet on one leg on that throw triple loop. So I'm going to give her the Pamchenko for pairs. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I'll be back with the men's and ladies recap. And what you can see for me after this particular recap is going to be a little bit of a hiatus, right? In competitions, we're through the Challenger season, we're through the Grand Prix season. So, like last season, I will do a Grand Prix and Challenger wrap up that will be in your feed probably next week. That sort of wraps up, who are the winners, who to look forward to as we go into the nationals part of the figure skating season. The other thing that you'll see from me this month, later in the month, closer to the end of the year, will be my top 10 moments of 2024 in the figure skating. So those are the two podcasts to look for after this recap. Then we'll hit national season and we'll be off and running in a different way. You guys can find me on all of the socials at Ice Skate Podcast, Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, X, and Threads. You can also send me a line at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment on the video on Spotify or on YouTube as well. I hope you had a great weekend of watching skating, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. And if you find that you're having some withdrawals, it's always a really great time to go back and watch some old programs. And I love to hear what are some of those old programs that you guys go back and watch time and time again. I definitely have some favorites of my own as well. All right, everybody, take care.